And then, well, Councilman Blackwell, Councilman Kramer, anything you want to touch on from the one item for budget? Sorry. Oh, Councilman Blackwell, I'm sorry, I didn't look up.
I can if you'd like.
Thank you, sorry. Councilman Blackwell, I apologize. I did not look up. Anything you want to touch on right now for the budget item?
Councilman Kramer actually chaired the committee, so you were probably right to begin with. But it's a very simple one. It was just one that was sent to business for possibility of additional support.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else to add, Councilman?
No, it was work that's being done in one of the divisions, police divisions, and I'm sure the sponsor would appreciate when it comes time, folks joining in.
Thank you. Colleagues, a reminder, all staff must take the employee training, sexual harassment prevention training. It's due on March 20th, and then council members also have to take the supervisor training. I completed mine. It probably takes you less than 10 minutes to do both. So I would encourage you to complete it. It's a PowerPoint presentation. You need to look and then answer, I think, 11 questions at the end. We have a photographer scheduled for April 13th. They'll be taking group shots, headshots. I encourage everybody to be here in person so we can get those done. This will include the District 8 council person, and then we'll do all of the majority caucus, minority caucus, women's caucus, all of those together, and the full council as well. If you would like an individual headshot taken or retaken, just let Brian in my office know, and we'll make sure that that gets scheduled as well. Or if there's any other group photos that you'd like to organize. Thanks to everybody who joined us for the Art in City Hall reception. We had a great turnout from the individual artists. Admire their work. It's on all 3 floors of council, of chambers. I think we've got some excellent representation. Appreciate both Councilman Hudson and Councilwoman Chappell for their selections. And we'll be graced by this artwork throughout the remainder of the year. Happy belated birthday to Sophia White, who you may want to know turned the big 6-0 yesterday. So make sure to give her a big congratulations on a milestone birthday. And then coming up, we've got Councilwoman Purvis on the 20th, Michael Gardner on the 23rd, Amanda Blackburn on the 25th, Sarah Feltner on the 28th, Brian Powell on the 29th, Councilman Hudson on April Fool's Day, Carmen Washington on the 7th, and Andrea Dern on the 8th. So those are all coming up. Colleagues, is on the agenda, we're joined tonight to discuss the Department of Justice's report on Louisville Metro Police Department and really on the timeline and process. So I've invited the Mayor's Chief of Staff and General Counsel David Kaplan and Assistant County Attorney Eric Granger to provide the council an update on the Department of Justice's LMPD report, specifically to understand the timeline, process, and next steps that we should expect in the process. So, David, if you could introduce yourselves, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Winkler, and thanks to everyone for hosting us here tonight. We're glad to be here. My name is David Kaplan. I am the Chief of Staff and General Counsel to the Mayor. And I have here with me Assistant County Attorney Eric Granger, who has been helping facilitate communications with the Department of Justice for quite some time. And he also has some important background information to provide. So I think we'll begin with Eric providing background on the investigation that led us to this point, and then I'll pick up with where we are right now and what we expect going forward.
Great. Thank you, David. And council members, it's good to be with you. I know I've worked with some of you in the past when I was an assistant county attorney for 12 years, then retired in 2020 and returned to work in this position as an assistant county attorney. So we thought we would start with just a very simple overview of the beginning of the Department of Justice's investigation, just to remind you some of the background on that. I know that you did receive a number of presentations under the prior administration as far as what was happening, as far as some of the budget committee meetings and the like. So, but I will start over with just the broad overview. As you will remember, the Department of Justice announced its investigation of Louisville Metro government and LMPD on April 26, 2021. It had a meeting with leadership and also sent a letter at that time. This investigation by the DOJ was a civil investigation. It was not a criminal investigation, and that's important to keep in mind. The investigation is what is commonly referred to as a pattern or practice investigation, and pattern or practice comes from a key phrase in the federal statute. It's important again to remember that the investigation looked at Louisville Metro government and LMPD practices overall as opposed to individuals. It might have looked at individual conduct that saw common across the board, but it was always looking to determine if it viewed in its investigation a pattern or practice of conduct. The statute is quite brief. It actually, the federal statute prohibits state or local governments from engaging in a pattern or practice of conduct by law enforcement officers that deprive individuals of rights secured by the U.S. Constitution or federal law. So that's the large scheme of how the Department of Justice was proceeding as it started its investigation. So again, as you know, started in April 2021, and what the Department of Justice notified us as it started its inquiry was that it would be looking at the following: all types of force used by LMPD to assess whether or not LMPD engaged in discriminatory policing, whether or not LMPD conducted unreasonable stops, searches, seizures, and arrests, both in patrol activities and in executing search warrants in homes. And finally, whether Louisville Metro and LMPD operated in a manner that discriminated against people with disabilities. Soon after the investigation began, Louisville Metro government and LMPD made a quick decision to fully cooperate with the DOJ investigation. As a result, the DOJ was provided with very broad access to documents, databases, body-worn camera video, probably the broadest access the DOJ has ever had in one of these investigations across the country. From the start, and as another part of that, the Department of Justice interviewed many people on Louisville Metro government staff and certainly many officers within LMPD through those interviews. From the start of the investigation in April of 2021 to the findings report being issued last week was a period of 23 months. And as you know, since you have seen the findings report, it's 86 pages in length, and it makes its findings in 8 overall areas. Now I'll turn it over to David for what the next steps are going forward.
Thank you, Eric. As Eric noted, the DOJ issued its findings report last week, and that was certainly a focusing event for us all, and certainly for the mayor, the chief of police, and all of Metro government. And what that report basically was the DOJ saying, we've completed our investigation, we believe there's probable cause to think that there's been a pattern or practice of law enforcement violating constitutional rights and other rights secured by federal law. There were also probable cause in DOJ's judgment to believe that there were violations of the Safe Streets Act and also Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So that was essentially DOJ saying this is our legal case that we intend to prove in court. The reason that we're negotiating a consent decree is that, like many other cities in the past, the mayor and the chief of police made an immediate decision that it was best for the city of Louisville for us to move past the findings in the report and get into discussions immediately. What remedies should Metro agree to pursue in collaboration with the community and the Department of Justice to improve our police department and pursue a course of police reform that would address any findings in the DOJ report. And that's the decision that was made immediately and decisively. And that's the course of action that most other cities have chosen. And we believe that's what the community wants. So think of the consent decree as a negotiated settlement with the DOJ that's intended to remedy this alleged pattern of practice of unconstitutional policing that's based on the findings report. What has to happen is that Metro will work collaboratively with the DOJ to figure out the best possible way to improve the police department so that a pattern of violations does not occur in the future. That's the goal. I think many of you are aware that the Department of Justice included at the ending of its final findings report 36 recommendations. You can think of each one of those recommendations as kind of being a separate project, all its own. And each one of those projects has to be fleshed out in the written agreement. And for that reason, this is why these agreements tend to get very long and take a long time to negotiate, because you have to figure out all of the many tasks that have to be performed to accomplish each of those recommendations. And certainly we intend to come to the DOJ with our own ideas and with the community's ideas. They certainly have a template and they have a vision of what they think police reform should look like, but our community also, I think, has that vision. And the idea is that if we do all of these things, and we do all of these things well, and when I say we, the Louisville Metro Police Department, first and foremost, and also Metro Louisville, if we do all those things and do all of them well, then we will be successfully creating a superb police department that best serves the community. That's the concept. Decrees generally require agencies to implement new policies, new training protocols, accountability systems that rely on data, and to track things such as use of force incidents and traffic stops, whether or not a citation or arrest occurs. There's going to be a third-party monitor that is an entity that will evaluate whether the city is, and the police department are complying with the consent decree, and that monitor will report out on an ongoing basis. The monitor is going to be jointly recommended by the Department of Justice and Metro, and we hope that we can agree on that. We expect that we would be able to. Ultimately, the court of law, the U.S. District Court, has the final say on who the monitor is, but we have reason to believe that if we have an agreement with the Department of Justice, that the court would defer to that. And so decrees end, they don't go on forever, and certainly the hope is that the consent decree can be complied with all deliberate speed. They end when the court is satisfied that the city and the police department have complied fully with the terms of the decree, and that there no longer needs to be court supervision to maintain the practices that would avoid any type of pattern of practice of violations in the future. You may be wondering, how long it's going to take to negotiate the decree, and the answer is we don't know exactly. But what we do know is that these agreements are long and are complex for the reasons that I stated. It's a blueprint for the entire reform process and all the many tasks and how the progress will be measured. So it gets very much into the weeds. We don't know how long ours will take. The mayor certainly wants to move forward immediately and make progress immediately. Baltimore, which was negotiated, I think, in 2017, or completed in 2017, the negotiations took 5 months to negotiate their consent decree. And this was the shortest negotiation timeline for any major police department decree. We have reason to believe that the Department of Justice sees 5 months as a pretty fast timeline for a consent decree, and we reasonably they may think it could go longer than that. Some decree negotiations have taken more than a year. We don't expect to follow that course, but that has occurred in the past. But we just want to emphasize that the mayor and the police department are committed to negotiate the best decree possible for the Louisville community. As Eric noted, consent decrees can get pretty long. They spell out a variety of specific reforms in areas such as use of force, stops, searches, arrests, and accountability systems. As I indicated, Baltimore is the most recent major city decree, 2017. It's over 200 pages long, and there are 500 enumerated requirements in the document. A single requirement could require multiple reforms to be implemented. So you can see how complicated this can get and how long it can take to get through it. Albuquerque settlement agreement had 344 requirements in it, went over 100 pages. So our marching orders are to collaborate with the DOJ, with input from the community, to negotiate the best agreement for the Louisville community and learn from prior experiences and hopefully do a timely, efficient job of getting reform started in this community. You may be wondering about cost. Again, we don't know how much this is going to cost to comply with. It's not going to be inexpensive. It's going to be material because the process may involve additional personnel. It could involve additional technology. It could involve additional training, outside training. And it's all going to depend on what's in the decree and what has to be done. Monitors are a pretty significant cost. I mean, we have been informed that it could range anywhere from $1.4 million a year to $2.25 million a year for the monitor, so that is significant. Other cities have tracked the amounts that they spend on consent decrees on an annual basis. It's a little difficult to compare apples to apples with these budget projections because some of the things that the Louisville Metro Police Department will be doing are already occurring in some respect. I mean, there already are personnel, there's already training, and many of you may know that, Paul Humphrey on the command staff has been instituting changes to implement the Hilliard Heinz report, and so there are some ongoing initiatives, but from what we have been made to understand by looking at data from other cities, is that New Orleans, for example, reported that it's spending between $5 and $8 million a year on compliance, and Cleveland ranged between $6 and $11 million per year. And again, it depends on how you categorize expenses. Are they new expenses? Are they part of an existing expense item? But obviously, it could be substantial. And so it's important to keep in mind as well that if all goes well and the consent decree is implemented in the shortest possible time frame successfully, a lot of these investments will have to continue to be made. So the monitor expense goes away, but other enhancements, we may need to plan to continue those into the future to make sure that there's no backsliding and that the implemented reforms continue into the future. As far as how long we would be under a consent decree, again, it's not possible to project that now. There were a number of consent decrees entered during the Obama administration, and it's my understanding that all of the decrees in major cities that were agreed to during that time frame continue today, with some being closer to the end than others. It's my understanding that Seattle entered its consent decree in 2012 and New Orleans in 2013. We understand that those are pretty close to the end, but clearly those have been in place for quite some time. Some are on track to take longer than a decade. So our goal would be to approach this with a sense of urgency and to create measurable tasks and implementation items where we can work efficiently to satisfy the court at the earliest possible time that Louisville Metro and the police department are completely in compliance. So with that, I don't know if you have anything else, Eric, but we'd be happy to take a few questions. I don't know how long we've got, but be happy to respond.
Yeah, thank you both for coming in for presenting. Councilman Godtee.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for being here. It was mentioned by a colleague of mine how much we appreciate the administration being so upfront and forthcoming with what's going on. It's very appreciated. You sitting here is part of that. The AG, some of the things that jumped off the page to me when he was here speaking was, number one, his thanks of the prior administration and the prior police chief, which put us in this mess, which frankly I was completely galled by. But also him mentioning Seattle as sort of the pillar of a consent decree, and there's two reasons why. Number one, as you just pointed out, they're 11 years in and over $100 million in, and they still don't know precisely when it'll be over. And since then, they have set records in crime, right? They have some of the highest crime levels ever. I accept the fact that we need to go through this process to correct things, correct failures of the past. I want a constitutional police department like everybody else. I don't want my constitutional right violated, so I don't want anybody else's. But we need, this needs to be very, very measured, and we need an out path, right? Because what I think has happened here, and I think you touched on it, you said quantifiable goals. So how does that work in the administration's ability to push back on the Department of Justice and frankly the monitor, who will be paid more the longer they drag it out, so that we create quantifiable goals so that when we achieve them, they can be checked off and we can move forward.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and we're very cognizant of the fact that depending on how the consent decree is worded, it can impact the ability to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the court that the reform plan has been fully implemented. So we understand that is a challenge. There is no accepted formula for exactly how to do that. Over time, the DOJ has taken different approaches. Sometimes it's been process-based, sometimes it's been outcome-based. There are different ways to measure whether you're doing things that in theory result in the reforms you're looking for. So what I can tell you, Councilman, is that we understand we need to negotiate a consent decree that can be accomplished within a reasonable period of time. We are getting advice from an individual with experience with Baltimore, with New Orleans, that can help us try to craft a consent decree that doesn't lead to debates over interpretation, over whether things have been accomplished successfully. The good news is it's called a consent decree. That means it's both parties consent. Both parties have to be satisfied that the DOJ has to be satisfied that we are agreeing to do the things that they think that will remedy the pattern of practice that they found. We have to be satisfied that we can accomplish this and that we're being good stewards of our resources and doing right by the community. So we think that we can collaborate with them in a way that results in something that can avoid pitfalls of getting stuck for too long.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman Reed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and this is going to be more of a statement than anything else. You mentioned measurable tasks, which, I think as a businessman, is something that we always try to establish for our supervisors. I noticed that on the report, it was very ambiguous in a lot of ways. For example, the word many was used 42 times. The word often was used 31 times. The word frequently was used 18 times. The word numerous was used 13 times. And the word routinely was used 16 times. So I guess my point is, it may be difficult to achieve measurable tasks when you're having this kind of lack of specificity, that's the word, in the report. So how do you address that? Can we push back a little bit and ask them for more specifics?
I believe that we've established a good working relationship with the Department of Justice in large part due to Eric's efforts and the efforts that were ongoing before we took office. I think, my opinion is that the Department of Justice is aware that this is a challenge. I think that they're open to our suggestions for how best to craft forms and ways of measuring those that allow us to agree as to whether they've been accomplished. I think that, as you note, frequency and impact are things that in an ideal world we get more information about, because that does drive, you know, if you're trying to measure change, positive change, you kind of want to know what the baseline is. And that's important. You know, we can't dictate to the DOJ how they look at that, but what we can do is use logic, have a conversation like you're talking about with the principles that you're talking about, and try to get on the same page about that. But it is a challenge, and that's why this may take a while to get right.
Thank you.
Councilman Arthur.
I have two quick questions and then a longer one. Recommendations number 4 and 7 about confidential informants are basically the same. Could you check with the Department of Justice to see if one of these recommendations was an oversight or if it should be something else?
Yes, sir, I'll do that. I know this one was a duplicate. I was thinking of saying 35 recommendations, but I'll check and see if there's one missing or if that's just a duplicate.
My second question is, could community input add to the recommendations or change them in any way?
We have been informed that the Department of Justice will be returning to Metro the week of April the 10th, after JCPS spring break is over, and that they are going to be talking more with the community. I don't know the exact plan, but I think the general framework is you know, a couple of town hall formats, meetings to get input from the community, from impacted communities. And I do think that can impact the recommendations. I don't know if they're going to take anything off the list, but I do think that they would be receptive and open to the idea that there may be things that they haven't.
My last question is about funding. On Thursday, March the 2nd, the Mayor's administration announced LMPD investments, a new headquarters and a new wellness center. The administration said that these will be paid for by the American Rescue Plan funding. The money that Metro Council approved for this was recommended based on the Hilliard Heights report and the Department of Justice report. Neither set of recommendations call for the investments that the mayor announced. Even when you look at the Hilliard Heights dashboard that LMPD maintains, it does not mention a wellness center or a headquarters. And when the amendments were discussed in the budget committee with the mayor's administration, you never mention a headquarters or a wellness center. So my question is, does the mayor still plan to spend this money in the same way following this announcement? And if so, why does he think he has the authority to violate the ordinance that we passed saying what the money was for?
I do think that both the Attorney General's public comments at the press conference held last week and the report support the idea that facilities and officer wellness are part of the entire picture. They're certainly not the only thing that needs to be invested in, but I do think there's some textual support, and specifically the Attorney General made the point that it's part of the reform picture. I do think that the mayor and chief do agree with that, and so you know, I would anticipate that the mayor will be advocating for spending in those areas. The current ordinance, the LAT that I think you're referring to, was I think $17.5 million allocated to public safety. And the ordinance that was previously proposed would extend the deadline that would allow that to be spent. But we don't believe that anything that the mayor has intends to advocate it goes against that ordinance. I think that we feel like it's within the general rubric of public safety. And so what we're trying to do is create a an entire package of things that will move the ball forward, and it's going to take some time. I mean, this consent decree will take quite a bit of time to negotiate, so we don't know yet all the things that are going to be necessary to adequately comply with it, but it's not just going to be a limited set of things like wellness or facilities. It's going to be a broader array of things that have to be funded.
Thank you, and I appreciate your opinion. I'm sure some of my colleagues have a different opinion, and I know plenty of people behind you have a different opinion. And just for the record, it does not vaguely say public safety. Our ordinance very clearly says these funds will address public safety practices, recommended by the Hilliard-Hines report and improvements we have learned from the Department of Justice. It's not vague. There is no general rubric. It is very clear about what we intended that money to be for, and I would hope that the mayor would not violate the law. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hawkins.
Thank you, President. Nobody has mentioned anything about the constituents and how they're gonna get their lives back and how their lives was affected and how they will overcome this. You just said that you guys were putting together a package. Well, I would include that trying to put a package together for the constituents that was affected. Their homes was violated, and the DOJ stated that it was a lack of policy. And I beg to differ. I didn't know that policy came with targeting, knowing not to target blacks. I didn't know that policy came with not knowing that you don't call people monkey. I thought that that just came with respect and integrity. So when you guys are getting your package together, I would include, put a package together for the constituents. Thank you.
Councilwoman Purvis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to know about the individuals that were prosecuted through some of this behavior. What is going to be done about this if these people were stopped or arrested or charged falsely and prosecuted? What is going to happen with them? Are their convictions going to be overturned?
Councilwoman, I don't have a specific answer for that question. I do know that I'm aware, I've been made to understand that there are over 60 specific incidents that are identified in the DOJ findings report. As the chief indicated, those are all being reviewed. There weren't any names or dates attached to those, so that's a process that is ongoing. I would just reiterate that the chief has indicated that those are being reviewed. And that's all I can tell you at this time.
I'd like to know if you can follow up with us on that and give us a report as to how this is going to be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Rashad.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. Quick question. I want to know, is there out of the recommendations at the end of the report, is there an order of importance to any of the tasks that you have before you? You can start there, and then I'll follow up.
Councilman, those, in my view, is that those are not intended to be stated in order of priority, but that's something that, to be sure, we have to ask the DOJ, but I don't think that they are intended to be that way. I think that's what the DOJ believes that all of those things need to be done to accomplish the goal of police reform.
Okay, follow up. I know I read about Tamika Palmer's statement, and I believe that she really wanted to get one of these processes moving quickly, and that's where the questioning came from about improving civilian complaints, the ability to approve civilian complaints against officers and creating a system that really holds officers accountable. That seems to be the most immediate of needs, one of the most immediate, I'm not gonna say the most, but one of the most immediate needs. Where does the office, what does your department stand on that order? Or, I'm just really trying to figure out if we're looking at these things, what is the first 3 priorities at least?
Well, the mayor's office and LMPD are completely aligned with what you're saying on civilian review, and that's in large part why that was one of the first things that we announced, and last week we announced that there was an agreement actually earlier this week, an agreement between LMPD and the Office of Inspector General to get that office the information that it needs to conduct these investigations that are authorized by the Civilian Review and Accountability Board. So the mayor felt that it was very important, and the chief agreed as well, to build public trust in that process by making sure that the Office of Inspector General gets the body camera footage that it needs, and also the officer testimony that it needs in full compliance with officers' due process. So this was an agreement that we made a priority after the mayor took office. We were able to get that done, and I think there's a new trust between Inspector General Harness and LMPD over working collaboratively to make sure that the public understands that the process is working and that this ordinance is fully implemented. And I want to thank Councilwoman Craney and Councilman Arthur for being part of that process. I know that the ordinance was important to both of them, and during these conversations with the OIG, I believe they were helpful in helping us get to where we needed to be. So I want to thank you all for doing that. So we're very pleased, and what we're trying to communicate to the public is we're not waiting. We have to collaborate with the DOJ. We have to reach a consent decree. That's going to be something that we must do. But we want to do the right thing right now, whether we've got a consent decree over us or not.
Councilman Baker.
Thank you. You spoke about doing the right thing, and I appreciate you for being here and the mayor's willingness to work on the 36 items. But I do have a direct question, and how many officers are currently employed right now with LMPD that have violated constitutional rights? Because that was essentially the report. And whenever it comes to funding and things, we can address with financial or fiscal or get monitors or whatever we need to do. But again, I think it's a large concern of the transparency of how many officers that they know on record that have violated people's constitutional rights. Can you speak to that?
I don't have a specific answer to that question other than to say that, as I indicated, there are over 60 incidents that are indicated in the report. The Department of Justice, because it's doing a pattern of practice investigation and not exploring individuals, did not give names or dates for those. But I do believe that, it's my understanding that some of those officers are still with the department and some are not. As far as giving you a specific example, and I'm talking about the 61 specific incidents, I don't believe it's going to be possible to identify every single officer based on the information provided by the Department of Justice, just because of the lack of detail there. But I think it's fair to say that some definitely can be identified, and some, I believe, would still be with the department, but I can't get more specific beyond that. It's still under review.
What will transparency to the council and to the general public look like for those once identified who are part of the report? And also, what things will the mayor be willing to put in place to make sure going forward that these things don't happen again?
Our focus is on reforming the police department. We are taking immediate action to do that. Our focus right now is working with the DOJ and the community to come up with a consent decree that will make sure that this police department is not exposed to things like the findings report found. And the goal, the mayor's goal is to be the best police department in the country. So we are focusing on coming up with the set of reforms that will accomplish that and allow that to be perpetuated into the future, and not to allow any backsliding.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Shanklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is similar to you, but I want to know, are they going to do investigations of some of these majors that knew about these incidents and just let it go? some of these judges that signed those papers, those same judges that signed them, I'm sure that some of those victims had to go before him, and it wasn't fair to them. They already knew enough about the case. And so I think there should be an investigation of the judges, the majors that knew about it, the sergeants, all of those. They should do something about them because they're still in those same positions, and there's no way that they did not know that the officers that work for them were doing these things because they talk among each other. So those majors need to be knocked down to sergeants or whatever. There's a lot of them that were involved, and I just want to see where justice is done for the people that went before those judges that had already signed off on them. So could we get an investigation of them also?
Councilwoman, what I can tell you right now is that the DOJ has issued its report, and it found in its view there's a pattern of practice of violations of people's rights. They gave a list of 36 recommendations that they believe if those are fully implemented, that there would not be any risk of that in the future. Our focus right now is, as soon as possible, getting into a room with the Department of Justice, and after community input has been obtained, and negotiating the best possible consent decree so that there are full remedies for all of the things that the Department of Justice found to have occurred.
Okay, we're looking at what already happened. I'm looking at forward. Those people that had already stood in front of those judges have a record now in all the problems that they went through. There should be something, an investigation of the 9 judges that continuously signed those papers and they knew it. So I think that needs to come out also. We don't mind. And some of the majors and the sergeants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Shanklin. Councilman Rashad.
Yeah, just from my understanding, why was this a civil investigation other than a criminal investigation?
My understanding is the Department of Justice has authority under 34 U.S.C. 12601 to do these pattern of practice investigations, and that statute, it's not a criminal statute. That statute was motivated by, I think, a congressional goal of identifying police departments where there are patterns or practices of violations of constitutional rights or federal law. So the focus is on transforming processes, systems to create police departments where there are no patterns. It's not a focus on individual conduct, and the statute does not have a criminal remedy provision in it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of criminal activity in this report, and it really needs to be addressed as such. And then just to follow up on Councilwoman Shanklin's point, I see a lot of, one of the recommendations are to support families of the victims. What I'm not seeing is restitution for those who've been convicted, restitution for all the families that have been damaged monetarily, physically, just emotionally, and just restitution to the community, because I know there's just way too many people that are affected by this, and a lot of them look like me. So now I've got to really just try to reconcile, if that was me in this position and I can't get a job anymore and I'm going through, I might end up turning to crime, and then I'm failed again by a system that really targeted me. So, what are we doing for, why aren't we talking about restitution to all the people who've been affected, harmed by these illegal and criminal practices?
Councilman, I was going to respond to your earlier question. As David noted, this particular investigation was under the pattern and practice statute, which is solely civil. But it is correct to say, and I know some of this was in the press, that the Department of Justice, in a different part of the Department of Justice, did pursue criminal indictments against some officers, and those were identified and have been moving through the process. So that, I was simply noting that was different from this investigation, that this one was civil, but the U.S. Department of Justice did pursue some of those other criminal indictments.
Please just have them pursue the rest of them.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you for being here. So in the 36 recommendations, and correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see a lot of getting to the root of a symptomatic problem with our officers, and that would include their emotional stability and their mental health, and perhaps PTSD issues that were not uncovered that may be responsible for a lot of the bad behavior. And, you know, in so saying, I would hate for us to spend $100 million in 10 years and be like Seattle and not move the needle very far. So, is that discussion, are those discussions being taken place so that from like the medical community, you know, we want to take care of the root problem and not just cover up the symptoms?
Councilwoman, that's an important question. You know, several weeks ago, the mayor announced that he supported the wellness center that could be used by first responders. The idea behind that is as you say, or as I think implied by your comments, that you know, policing and other first responder roles can be a stressful profession. Police officers and first responders have the same types of challenges as other human beings, but you know, due to the nature of their careers, that could be exacerbated. So we do believe that, and we think the Justice Department agrees that officer mental health and wellness is a part of the picture here. Obviously training, obviously supervision, obviously accountability. If there are violations of rules, those are all very important things. But having officers who are physically and mentally well, that's good for the protection of the community, and it's good for their protection as well. And so we support that.
I was just thinking about psychological evaluations periodically and free counseling and time off if there is a determination, if there is an extremely high stress level that may lead to some type of explosive behavior out in the field. If they're getting appropriate counseling and knowing, getting counseling or even education on what triggers are, those types of things. I mean, I think the mental health of our police, just like our homeless population that we're trying to take care of, and our drug addicts. I mean, it's a different type of thing, but it's the same type where we put a lot of focus on and monies toward. I think our police department needs that too. They have a very stressful job, and if they're not operating in a good head place, they're going to do stupid stuff. So I think that really is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues, we've got several more people in queue. I just want to make everybody, it's 6:20. I think this is a critically important discussion, so we will continue. But would also probably ask that a lot of the conversation should probably also be followed up on either in Public Safety Committee or Government Accountability. So it might be a good idea to also ask Mr. Kaplan to come back to one of those committees for further discussion. So, but I will certainly entertain the questions that are in queue, but if you've got more, it might be good to ask either of those two chairs to ask Mr. Kaplan to come back.
Dave's already going to be in government or public safety on Tuesday.
Thank you. Okay, so we may hold some of those questions for Tuesday. If you want to drop out of queue, you may do so, but if not, I will call on you. Councilman Hawkins.
Yes, I have one or two questions. The first one is, can you give us the number of officers still active that's left on the force that was involved?
Yeah, I can't give you that number, but what I do know is there are over 60 incidents described by the Department of Justice report. There weren't any names or dates attached to that. And as I indicated before, I don't know if it's going to be possible to identify every single officer involved in any of those 61 incidents based on the information we've been provided by the Department of Justice. So I can't answer that question.
Okay, secondly, my question is, can you go a little bit more detail about what the wellness center entails, and don't officers have insurance? And is the wellness center a gym?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question?
Is it a gym? Just
So-
going dead on what the wellness center is.
So
I just want to know if officers had insurance.
As currently conceived, the wellness center is in property that was purchased by the Police Foundation. It is being leased back to the Louisville Metro Police Department in exchange for lease payments that would run through the end of 2026, and then at that point it becomes $1 a year lease. And so the responsibility for putting the programming into the wellness center is the responsibility of the LMPD. They are identifying, they have identified contractors who can provide, mental health and wellness type services in that center. There will be a number of police officers specifically assigned to support the wellness center, and the Police Foundation is taking a portion of the lease payments and putting that back into support programming, for officer health and wellness. I do believe there are exercise facilities in that building, but I don't think it would be totally accurate to call it a gym. I certainly think there is exercise equipment in there, and it can be used for that purpose. So I think physical wellness is a component, mental health and wellness is also a major focus of it.
Thank you. And I would just go on top, because I know there was some commentary made that you believe that it is compliant with the previously passed ARP ordinance. I would encourage you to consider bringing back the item for discussion to council. I don't know, I'm not an attorney, I don't know whether legally you have to bring it back or not. But I think in the spirit of partnership, it would be the right decision to bring it back to the budget committee for discussion. Whether you believe that a wellness center falls under the category of reform or not, I think it's pretty clear for those of us who were here that voted for that line item, what that money was intended for. And if that use is going to be materially different, and I think this was Councilman Arthur's point at budget committee it was either budget committee or it was full council 2 weeks ago, that should be discussed. And so I would strongly encourage you to bring that item back and discuss it and let us vote on it.
We would appreciate the opportunity to come back and explain how these initiatives fall within suggestions of DOJ.
Councilman Simon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like for you to speak to the level of investigation when it comes to the previous administration's office, the mayor's office. Is he immune from investigation? Is he being investigated criminally, civically? Could you speak to how he's being investigated, please?
Councilman, I don't have any information on that.
Councilman Baker.
Thank you. For sake of time, I'll keep it short with my question. To my colleague's point about getting to the root problem, I have a great deal of respect for anybody who puts their life on the line to protect and to serve. So I think that's a great use of the term, the root problem. This is an ask for the record. The root problem is the lack, in my eyes, in Dana's eyes, of the lack of investment that we have done in these communities. So when we look at the 36 points that were suggested from the DOJ, I believe that there also has to be an investment to address those public safety needs. So we can lay it all the feet on the officers in blue who vowed an oath to serve and protect us. But I also challenge the mayor's office to look deeper at the root of the problem. And I'll leave you with this last, especially for people in this report who look just like me and were considered monkeys and whatever. My father once said, it's not the ceiling, it's the sticky floor. And until we address the sticky floor, we will never reach the ceiling. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Rashad.
Yeah, I realized that from my last question, I never got an answer, so I'm gonna ask it again. How are we gonna give these people restitution? Are we getting ready to clear people's records? Are we getting ready to make people whole? You know, I call it restitution. Some people call it reparation, but whatever it is, it needs to happen. Yeah, I'm waiting for an answer.
As I indicated, the Department of Justice investigated whether there was a pattern or practice of certain violations. They found that there was. And what I can tell you, Councilman, with all respect, is that this administration is moving forward speedily to put in place a consent decree that is best for this community with community input. That's what I can tell you right now.
All right, I'll ask y'all again Tuesday.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Hawkins.
Yes, I didn't get my question answered either. Is the number of officers that committed any of those acts, are they still on the force? And I would like to know, is this gym gonna be in one of our communities?
And by communities 1 through 6.
It's, I can't give you the exact location, but it's off of Eastern Parkway, kind of in St. Joe's area. I think that's where the Wellness Center building is located. What was the other question?
Are any of the officers that committed any of those acts that are in that report still on the force? That should be very easy to identify. You said that it would be hard to identify, but I don't understand why. You got the body cams, that's why the DOJ is here. So what are you guys planning on doing about those officers that are still actively getting paid?
The Louisville Metro Police Department did ask the DOJ for information that would make it easier to identify. I know you've read the report, so you know that there were descriptions without names or dates. So it does take some time to go through and try to match.
Do you have a timeline?
And I don't have an exact timeline for you, Councilwoman, but I do know, I am aware that there's a list of over 60 particular incidents that were identified as examples in the DOJ report. They certainly didn't include everything that they thought made up the pattern or practice. What they were doing was giving examples. So I know you're asking me about those because those were the ones that we all know were in their findings report. I believe it's possible to identify some of the individuals involved in those. I don't think it's going to be possible based on the information we've been supplied to identify all. But right now, our focus is on putting police reform in place to protect the community.
So we know they did these acts, but we don't know who did them. That's hard to believe.
As I indicated before, the chief indicated that all of those incidents that were described generally in the report are all under review.
I'll ask that again on Tuesday.
Councilman Ackerson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, I would encourage my colleagues to show up at it was said to be on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. We go late. But I do want to say this. Number one is I appreciate David for being here today. Tremendously. I appreciate what I've been reading in the press about your administration, the mayor's administration in your office, and others working with the Inspector General's office to improve transparency and cooperation with the LMPD. I want to emphasize to my colleagues, these folks have been at their helm for 2.5 months. They inherited this pile of crap. They didn't do it, but they're working hard to fix it. And I don't think this isn't like a light switch. It's gonna take some time. It's gonna take a lot of input. And so I don't think we're gonna get the answers we want today. Now, 6 months from now, we'll be doing some answers. But I want to encourage everyone to have some patience. I think that the mayor and his administration have proven their commitment, proven their willingness to come over here and be candid, be honest, answer tough questions. And so I would encourage us to give them a little leeway to deal with the problem they did not create, but they are committed to solving. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman McCraney, I'm giving you the last question.
Thank you. It's just a statement, and that is, I am very grateful that this DOJ report has come out. If I were writing it, it would have been tougher. I don't think it went deep enough. But I will work diligently with all of the administration and LMPD to make certain that the wrongs that have been created in this community are righted. However, it takes. And we've heard a lot of commentary today and a lot of questions on how we're going to go about certain things, dealing with the LMPD, dealing with restitution, or what have you. We're going to be patient with this process, but I want to encourage the administration to be transparent to a fault. Not take credit where you don't deserve credit. If we have to push back on you and beg and plead and threaten outside counsel for you to get something done, then you get no credit for that. I won't say anything further, but I'm very adamant about making sure you do what you say you're gonna do, you're honest in your appeal, and that you don't take credit where you don't deserve credit, but you work hard and do right by the people and the citizens of this community. And I will be watching.
On behalf of the mayor, I want to thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for asking good questions and allowing us to come in. The Metro Council is going to be critical to this process. We want your feedback. We want your input. The DOJ emphasized in its report the importance of community input and buy-in, and you all are as close to your various communities as anybody can be. So we really do need that, and we will keep you updated as we go through, and we'll continue to seek input. We do this as a collaboration.
Mr. Kaplan, Mr. Graninger, thanks for coming today. We'll hear again from you on Tuesday at 5 o'clock at Public Safety. Colleagues, one thing was brought to my attention, somebody missed, they would like to pull item 29 from the consent calendar and move it to old business. So, Madam Clerk, please note. With no further business before us, colleagues, the Committee of the Whole is adjourned. We will reconvene 6:45.
If you do nothing else. If you do nothing else.
If you do nothing else.
If you do nothing else.
If you do nothing else.
If you do nothing else.
If you do nothing else.